We're talking about hydrogen. It's rapidly emerging as a game changer in the race to decarbonize transportation. From regional rail to last mile delivery, this panel highlights groundbreaking projects, including North America's first hydrogen fuel cell battery train, the ZEMU, not to be confused with the ZEMA, and the latest advances in hydrogen-powered fleets, zero-emission delivery and supporting infrastructure. Experts from public agencies, industry, and engineering will share how they're scaling hydrogen solutions across freight, rail, and transit to cut emissions and strengthen energy resilience. My name is Matt Dickinson. I currently serve as the Sustainability Director at Phoenix Marine Services, one of the largest container terminals in the Port of LA. My work focuses on developing strategies to deliver energy resilience, zero emissions, and commercial scale hydrogen integration across one of the most complex logistic environments in North America. I've had the privilege to work with many of the agencies and innovators represented on the stage, and it's exciting to see how hydrogen is now moving beyond pilots and into real-world operations. As of September 2025, Southern California became home to North America's first hydrogen fuel cell battery train, the ZEMU, which is now engaged in actual revenue operations. So that's fantastic. Transforming freight, rail, transit, and last mile delivery, what it takes to scale them responsibly and economically. We've got an incredible lineup here, leaders from public agencies, industry, and engineering, each tackling a different piece of the zero emissions puzzle. So let's jump right in and meet our panel. Start with, that's me. Carrie Schindler, Executive Director, San Bernardino County Transportation Authority. Carrie leads SBCTA's major transit and rail initiatives, including the launch of the ZEMU hydrogen fuel cell battery train, the first of its kind in North America. She's recognized for her hands-on leadership in sustainable transportation, innovation, and public sector project delivery. Next is Mia Wang, Assistant Deputy Executive Officer of the South Coast Air Quality Management District. With over 25 years at South Coast AQMD, May drives regional innovation through incentive funding, technology demonstrations, and infrastructure programs for zero and near zero emissions heavy-duty vehicles, locomotives, and marine craft. Dr. Ben Happick, General Manager, Commercial Vehicles and Hydrogen, Hyundai Motor North America. Dr. Happick oversees Hyundai's commercial vehicle and hydrogen initiatives across North America, integrating OEM research, production, and commercialization. He previously led Hyundai's fuel cell truck programs in Korea and brings deep technical and market insights. And last, but certainly not least, is Brianne Overton, Principal Project Manager at Mott MacDonald. Brianne specializes in transportation infrastructure planning, design, and implementation, with expertise in zero and low emissions rail and bus systems. She's led complex multi-agency infrastructure projects across North America, focusing on the intersection of engineering, operations, and sustainability. Brianne led the hydrogen infrastructure for the first...
for the ZEMA.
For the ZEMA. The SBCTA ZEMA project, and is currently supporting other California agencies, including Caltrans, NCTD, in their efforts to implement hydrogen rail. So we're going to get into some questions. You guys ready?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Before we get into questions, if there's something that you want to ask, we'll save time for questions at the end, but if there's something that you want to lose your train of thought on or something like that, you feel it's important, we can ask, work it in, all right? So keep that in mind. All right, we'll start with Carrie. What surprised you most during your journey from concept to revenue service for the ZEMU train?
Yeah, so what surprised?
You have to tell me.
Okay, there we go. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for having us here. So I'm very proud and passionate about the Zero Emission Multiple Unit project and initiative. What surprised me most about it is, as the concept was formed, how simple it was, but how transformative it was. And I don't use transformative a lot. It's not one of my buzzwords. But we seem to find just the sweet spot of an opportunity, and then we harnessed a lot of energy and a lot of resources. We partnered with the state to bring it to fruition. And so how that happened is, there was a project in the works to extend Metrolink from San Bernardino, the LA Union Station, San Bernardino Run, to extend it to Redlands. It had been in the works since I was in middle school, if you can believe it. And so I was working on that as director of transit and rail, and we recognized through the environmental process, the citizens did not want the retired Metrolink locomotive health coaches. That had been the plan, it was cost effective, they did not want it, they spoke out and they said we can do better. And so we ended up pursuing what are called diesel multiple units. They're used more often in Europe. There are two passenger cars on either end, or maybe more, and a power pack in the middle, and that power pack is a diesel engine acting as a generator, powering electric motors at the wheels. That's what started this whole concept. Couple that with San Bernardino County is gorgeous. We have a lot of wildlands, we have beautiful mountains, but we are west of here, and the way the weather pattern works is we get a lot of the pollution comes our way and gets stuck at those mountains. So it's something that we are very focused on as the Transportation Authority, is looking at all opportunities we have as we develop more traditional transportation projects, is how do we improve air quality in our area. We shopped the idea around heavily for a couple of years, looking for money from my partner here, South Coast AQMD, CARB, and finally CALSTA, the California State Transportation Agency, really became a great partner to us, provided us a large grant to get going, harnessed, brought together the right technical experts and moved forward. What's key in here is that we want to do projects and advance transportation in a clean way. If we wanted to electrify the Metrolink San Bernardino line, so it's a 60-mile line, it would cost $12 billion in today's dollars. Metrolink is funded through 5 member agencies, and every year we bicker and we work hard to figure out how to fund their basic service needs and their basic state of good repair needs. So the idea that we would wait until we had $12 billion and we could electrify that entire line just wasn't as viable as focusing on the vehicle, containing it within the vehicle, in addition to modifications to a maintenance facility and getting hydrogen fueling and supply set up. But if we contained it to the vehicle, we could advance this concept much quicker. So simple, but transformative. And I will just add one thing, is the Federal Railroad Administration, I thought they were going to be our biggest obstacle. That's our regulatory entity. They became one of our biggest cheerleaders, I would say, and was a great partner the whole way.
That's encouraging. Thank you. Next we move on to you, May. How does South Coast Air Quality Management District balance innovation, risk with accountability to the public?
So as a regulatory agency, we are responsible to improve air qualities and protect the health of 17 million people here in the Los Angeles, Orange County, San Bernardino, and Riverside. So we treat every dollar that we have very importantly. So we basically invest money looking at the technologies out there, and we build our portfolio to have a very broad range of experience, and we look at the technology. We will incentivize the development of technology when they have a, the technology readiness level, we call TRL level, between 3 to 8, and we usually are more focused on the technology. They have a higher TRL level to make sure that we have a higher success rate. And then we also leverage our dollar with a private and public partnerships. We work with Hyundai on developing hydrogen Class A trucks, and we work with our partner of SVCTA on building the infrastructures. And so we try to work with experienced partners, and we monitor our project very closely, and we also be flexible. As long as the goal is accomplished, we want to be as flexible as possible to work with our partners. But at the same time, we also go through the contracting process. We make sure that we incentivize the dollar, but we make sure that we pay for what is delivered. We don't advance payment or anything, but we treat our every dollar very seriously.
Thanks, and I've been the beneficiary of your funding as well, so thank you. Ben, on to you, sir. What lessons from Hyundai's international hydrogen truck deployments apply to the U.S. markets?
Well, first of all, thank you everybody in the audience for being with us so at such a late hour, and appreciate for the opportunity to speak to you today. So in case of Hyundai, we have been deploying fuel cell trucks since 2020, starting in Europe, in Switzerland, have been running 50 trucks there, have now about 100 in Germany, and 56 in the United States. So I think what we could really take out of these overseas deployments is really data. So we have tons of operational data that is really helping us to improve the performance, the capabilities of the trucks that we have right now on the road. And we also got a lot of very important customer feedback, because you can imagine that it's not as easy to convince drivers to step into a fuel cell truck for the first time. They're used to diesel and CNG. They want to understand what it means to be in a new technology like that. And I can imagine that a train conductor may have similar feelings about it. If it's not an electric train or a diesel train anymore, if it's a fuel cell or hydrogen train, you have to do a lot of education and convincing, and all the data that we gathered over 5 years in Germany, in Switzerland, really helped us to bring this technology also to North America. And by the way, we also have trucks running right now in Canada, so it's not just the United States, it's Canada too. And given the environmental policies, maybe Canada is becoming more and more attractive, because I hope that we will get to a point that we will have further regulations helping us, but until then, we have to chip away.
So we're on our own. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I dealt with a little bit of that with rolling out the first hydrogen machine to the union environment. We had to work a lot with the operators and do a lot of training and workforce development, so it resonates with me. Brianne, what do you see as the biggest engineering and permitting challenges for zero emissions infrastructure?
Good question. I feel like I could take the whole panel talking about this, but I'll keep it brief and break it into kind of two parts, the battery electric side and the hydrogen vehicle side. And I think on the hydrogen fleet side, what's been great is we've really seen the vehicle technology advance and demonstrate and be successful. So, we see battery electric bus fleets and fuel cell fleets, and their performance has really been kind of tested and demonstrated with SBCTA as well. That technology on the rail side is there. What I think the engineering focus now needs to be is on the supply side and on the infrastructure side. I'm sure that's been a theme in a lot of the conversations today. On the infrastructure side, it's really the fueling infrastructure, and I think it's a challenge whether you're talking about buses or rail or port vehicles. There's a tremendous amount of inefficiency in the transport of liquid hydrogen that I think a lot of agencies are trying to address. And then just the fueling interface. There's slow fueling, and I think in the bus space it's okay operationally because you're dealing with lower volumes. But when you're talking about 300 kilograms of hydrogen and a tight operational turnaround, you can't be fueling for hours. It's super inefficient. So we need the infrastructure industry to kind of catch up, and we need more players in that space. And on the supply side, I'm sure everybody's aware that supply is starting to emerge, but it's limited. On the battery electric side, I think again the infrastructure is a little more advanced. We've got really great high capacity charging systems. I think as an agency you can plan for your fleet, you can plan for your charging systems, you can get ahead of that, order your equipment. But the challenge is you're still at the mercy of the utility provider if you need that service upgrade. And I think we're seeing a lot of challenges just in working with those utility providers to kind of get that new service in place. And so I think that's where that engineering and permitting focus needs to be is, how do we get ahead of the curve on if we need major power upgrades to, maintenance facilities to support large, electric fleets. So those are the ones that stand out for me, but there's a lot, I'm sure. Happy to talk more.
The struggle is real. I think the supply side is really kind of like the long pole in the tent there for a lot of these things. In my boardroom, for example, to add more hydrogen equipment, the first question I get is, where's the hydrogen coming from? And I don't really have a great answer to that. And if I did, the next question would be, how much does it cost? And I have an even worse answer to that question. So, yeah, it's something that it's got to come. We got to build it. All right, Carrie. Wow. When you were doing the ZEMU project, how did you manage risk and public perception around the introduction of hydrogen into the railroad environment?
So a couple things we benefited from was the use of alternative fuels, and technology was getting normalized in society as we embarked on this. So many of the fears that were expressed right off the bat, as we kind of vetted and looked at what were our risks, what were people going to think, what were people going to say, just did not materialize. I mean, the concepts of introducing alternatives so that we could have cleaner air was starting to get a lot of traction, and I would say especially in Southern California, and we benefited from that. Second is that the Federal Railroad Administration is known for an extremely high level of safety. It is that is what they are all about. You know it when you go out on a construction site and you're working within their regulatory space. You know it when you go through their training. We brought them in early and we sat down and we said, what do you want to see? What do you think? And they kind of gave us some lessons learned from the freight railroads who had embarked on this and then backed off and embarked and backed off. And we listened and we took it very seriously. We did not limit any resources or put any governors on our consultants or our staff. We said this is the most important thing and go out and do it to the best of your ability. Let us know if you run into challenges that cannot be solved. And then lastly, we brought in independent third party through the California, it was actually the World Hydrogen, you know the name?
Hydrogen Safety Panel.
Hydrogen Safety Panel. We brought them in independently. We gave them strict, guardrails. You're not here to tell us what we want to hear. Tell us what we need to hear, and that is your role and responsibility. And once we got that in place, we had a great sounding board. I would also say that we were fortunate in our entire team believed in the concept, but they also believed that safety was number one. And so it was something from the very start. I just saw this culture of putting that first, consistently in place, never questioned, never circumvented. Real quick on the FRA side, you have to go through a hazard analysis process that is extensive. And so while I talked through some of these concepts and how we brought these partners together and how we set the culture, all of that ended up on paper, all of it, and was vetted through meticulously. Great process, many hours, done much of it during COVID, so early hours for us in America, and late evening hours for those in Europe and in other places, Asia, just working through that, matrix and making sure we were doing the best possible thing we could for the situation.
Nice. Sounds like solid leadership to me.
I was going to add that, Carrie, you sort of understated it. I feel like the commitment to safety was really paramount, and actually they were successful in winning a Hydrogen Safety Excellence Award last year for the project. So I think it just shows a testament to kind of the underpinning of safety in the program.
Yeah, you empowered your folks, and you brought in regulators early and added them to the conversation as a recipe for success, I think, going forward. Nice work. May, do you have any incentive mechanisms that are proving most effective in your rollout of hydrogen?
Everyone say on the heavy duty side, really diesel has to be, hydrogen has to be as cheap as diesel. But it's just not just the fuel, it's also the equipment. So to scale up, you really have a couple pieces of puzzle you need to put together. You need a fuel supply, you need a reliable stations, and you need a reliable equipment, and you also have to go through a workforce training to train the fleet operator, and you need a fleet operator's commitment to operate this equipment. So to really scale up our hydrogen technology, we need to know how we incentivize and where we incentivize. Just incentive alone is not going to be enough to scale up the hydrogen to the way that we want. Right. So we really require a lot of collaboration with multiple agencies and OEMs, the OEMs to support to really develop the technology to make sure that there is doable as a diesel, and at the same time we need to invest on the supply chains, how you produce hydrogen from clean energies and enough supply. So scalable, modular approach, we think that will be, and incentivize and also advocate for the policies. We need the policy, we need clean fuel policies to incentivize the fuel suppliers, in order to scale up. So you really need to multi-faceted approach to incentivize different sectors to really scale up the hydrogen technologies.
Thank you. Now, follow on. You got me thinking about how do you think the best approach is to solve the chicken-egg doom loop we seem to be in right now with the supply-demand side of things? I know, for example, a lot of projects are we won't put a shovel in the ground until we have offtake agreements, and people that would typically sign offtake agreements don't even have the equipment or the idea of what their offtake would even look like. So it's a weird space, and I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that, we are pushing the legislature to really, in California, we kind of have an advantage. Our resident knows that we need the clean technology, we need clean fuel. So, and we do have a big incentive dollar. So at this stage, we have, we're lucky we still have some fundings to move the hydrogen technology forward, but we really need to look at the long runways to train our workforce to be able to service these equipments, so we need to do both.
Sure.
There's no chicken and egg. We need both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I will just, the state, and maybe the numbers have improved, but as of a year ago, there was one CARB permit for hydrogen production in the state of California. So we need to figure out how to solve that problem. Because we have hydrogen production in Arizona, and we have it in Nevada, right adjacent, very close to our borders. So it's just this interesting, it is a chicken and egg, but it's also I think it's a lack of foresight in very strong policies to get us into a zero emission environment, but not maybe the understanding, willingness, or you might know better than me, but why is that? If you have an entire state policy says you're gonna move all your transportation, your buses, your rail was further out, but you're going to move them all to zero emission, but you can't issue the permits to get the hydrogen production. There's something, someone the communication's not happening.
Something's not adding up, right?
Yeah, and if I may add to that, so to make it a little bit more interactive maybe. So I think bureaucracy is standing in the way of many good things, and the perfect often is the enemy of the good, right? I mean, it has to be always green and CI minus 250 or whatever. So not very practical in many approaches. So I think we have to overcome these hurdles in order to get something done collectively.
I couldn't agree. I could not agree more.
Yeah. How do you feel about I think the green hydrogen piece has been kind of a headwind because the inputs are scarce and expensive. And the subsidies are now gone. So how do you feel about natural gas as a feedstock for hydrogen production? Is that something that anybody's?
I'm all for establishing the supply chain and the infrastructure and all the processes we need to, because we know where the green hydrogen is the right word, well stock comes from. It's sun and wind. Like when we really want to get green, maybe methane off of landfills, but we need to get the other things in place and then support it by transitioning it to green. And we're still way ahead of where we are.
I love it. Yeah, I agree 100%. All right, Ben. How can OEMs help overcome the infrastructure gap for hydrogen refueling?
Well, it's, I think, pretty easy. We have to bring vehicles, right? I mean, that's what we are supposed to do as equipment manufacturers. But I also think that OEMs have to put a little bit more skin in the game, frankly speaking. I mean, just the expectation that somebody else will take care of everything and build all the infrastructure that we need and produce all the hydrogen molecules that we put into our vehicles is maybe not good enough. Maybe we have to do more. The company that I'm representing, we have a project in Savannah, right next to our so-called Meta plant, where we build all of our electric vehicles. And we are currently building a refueling station there that is fueling 21 trucks, 21 fuel cell trucks that are running our green plant logistics. So that's, I think, a pretty interesting project. And we are using SMR technology because, to be very frank, in Georgia, there's not a lot of support for green and clean. And I hate to say it, but nobody really cares. We want it to be clean. Maybe not green, not yet, but we are working on it. It is a stepwise approach, and everything has to be done at the right point in time. So we started, and we wanted to be as close to diesel from a cost perspective as possible. So we ended up choosing that technology. Because the reality is, somebody has to pay for it, right, for the service. If it's a train transportation, or if it's a truckload that is being transported to somewhere, there has to be the willingness to pay, maybe even a slight premium. But what we have encountered, and I'm in this industry now for 15 years, and hydrogen maybe for 8 years, there's almost no willingness to pay extra. Even the big companies that are saying, oh, we are all over sustainability, and we really, sometimes it's more like greenwashing, I have to be very frank. So this is why we have to be realistic and start somewhere, and that somewhere maybe SMR right now. And then in the future, we can also talk about sunshine in the bottle and electrolysis and all of that. So,
I was just
Thanks.
going to add too, I think we need to kind of drum up a bit more competition, right? I think we were talking about that earlier. There's not a lot of players in this space right now, and they've sort of got a bit of a monopoly as well. And there's not as much incentive to really drive the innovation there. There's stuff happening, but I think that's the other part of it is like it's always the chicken and the egg, but yeah, it's just kind of pushing the industry to go a bit further.
Yeah, I agree, and great insights. Same kind of genre vein. We're gonna keep brand. How can you hedge your bets in today's transit designs to remain flexible for future zero emissions technologies?
So for flexibility, what comes to mind is really being kind of vehicle agnostic. I think with these technologies, what we're seeing is when folks are thinking about their facilities as infrastructure, or charging or fueling, they're being quite specific in how they design around that. And I think knowing that these technologies are advancing and knowing that the design of the vehicles might change or your technology that you're using might change, we need to start building infrastructure that provides a bit more flexibility and is resilient to changing fleet types, changing OEM types, and ideally that infrastructure is lasting longer than the vehicles that you're working with in some cases. So I'll give you a specific example, but in the rail space with SBCTA, there was a lot of questions about just put a vent stack over where the hydrogen's going to come out and it'll be fine. And I think taking a step back and saying, well, how do we build this for really like a long period of time, and the hydrogen might not always be in this exact spot on the train. So we need to think holistically about future-proofing these facilities for different types of vehicles. The vehicle weights as well really vary. You can't just design your pits and your vehicle lifts for that specific fleet. So I think it's about bringing someone on board who's going to look at a range of that and also mixed fleet operations, right?
Yeah.
In the bus space, you might have, battery electric and fuel cell. So it's about, creating that infrastructure that's going to allow you to kind of do both, but not paint yourself into a corner such that when you do purchase new vehicles in the future, you're having to do a whole bunch of expensive retrofits.
Yeah, yeah, that would be a tough sell, really.
Yeah.
Carrie, how will hydrogen rail integrate with future freight and transit corridors in California?
So I see our initiative with the ZEMU as setting a precedent that you can do it, that it is possible. and that it's definitely a worthwhile endeavor. I also, our partners, Stadler Rail, that was our vehicle manufacturer. They needed to be willing. They needed to know that it was worth it. It was a big risk to them. Their reputation really, that's what they are able to stake their claim on future sales on, right? So we had ourselves, we had great consultants like Ron McDonald backing us up, Metrolink at the table, and really the California State Transportation Agency, CalSTA, was a huge partner. And this was completely done to say this is the blueprint of how you can do it. And it's not a one-size-fits-all. You do need to look at maintenance facility. You do need to look at hazards. Not all trains run on the same terrain. There can be tunnels. There can be other things traveling on those tracks that you need to analyze and look at and address. But I see this as a giant stepping stone to it is viable. Look at the complete cost to what the alternative is. And let's be really honest about where all our energy, like the source, feed source, well source for all our energy is. All energy is going to have hazards. They all need to be addressed. Look at it and address it and move on and choose what's best for that situation. I'm very proud to say in October of 23, I think it was. I always question that year because it was 2 years ago. The state, so I always envisioned we would get this project done, we'd get it deployed, it'd go into revenue service. That happened a couple months ago. We went through extensive testing at a test track in Colorado. So I thought, then the state will go build on the initiative that we've done. But they didn't wait. Once it went through testing in Colorado and they saw how it performed and they saw what we had done, they went out and they entered a contract with Stadler Rail to purchase up to 29 more zero-emission multiple units, or what Stadler likes to call third H2s. So they did that based on when they immediately saw the vehicle perform, and it broke a world record for the longest run on a hydrogen fuel tank. I mean, it outperformed all their projections. And it wasn't done as a prototype. It was done as, this is how if you want to keep doing it, let's do the vehicle that you would order 20 of. And so they did that, and they're now on the cusp of starting the actual manufacturing of 10 of those. So I think it just gave the blueprint. We're open. We offer to talk to so many people. We've had North County Transit District come. We have SoCal Gas coming out next week. We want to share our story and what we did and how we did it. We're very proud of it, and we're very practical in what the roadblocks were and challenges still are with hydrogen supply. But that was the goal: set the blueprint, execute on it, and that's what we did. So that's how I see it.
Thanks. I really am looking forward to seeing one of those pull a train out of our rail yard at the port. We're ready to service it with zero emissions equipment. We can launch the first zero emission train out of LA. Awesome. May, when you think about how local agencies are interacting with the various projects, do you feel like they can align better with funding opportunities from LCFS, IRA, and CAP incentives?
Absolutely. I think collaboration is the key. Different part of money has a different restrictions and different timings. So a lot of time when you're funding a project, they may be waiting for different piece of fundings, and it's going to delay the projects. So if all the agencies can sit together and say, hey, the IRA money can only fund certain portions, our incentive dollar can go into stations, the LCFS can go into the production credit. So there's different pieces that the agency will have to work together to make sure that we don't overpay a project, but the project can be fully funded and deployed as timely as possible. So all the agencies really need to work together and be flexible, because the goal is to produce hydrogen and equipment that we use for the hydrogen technology. So I think that collaboration is the key.
Great, thank you for those insights. Ben, we're going to go shift gears a little bit. What does the actual commercialization of hydrogen vehicles look like, and how close are we?
Well, they are there. I'm actually surprised that you think that we aren't there yet. I can speak obviously mostly for the company that I'm representing, but we started developing fuel cells in 1998 as an own product. Like you would put an engine into a passenger car, we developed a fuel cell system that is basically has the envelope of an engine, so it would fit in an engine bay. And we started doing that 25 years ago when I was just entering university, actually. So I'm not taking any credit on that, so that's for sure. But in case of cars, I mean, the first passenger cars came to market in 2013. In our case, that was the Tucson FCEV, Toyota had the Mirai shortly after, so it was almost the same, but Hyundai was a little bit faster, so sorry for the pun, I had to say that. And then in 2018, we brought the Nexo to market, which is the world's best-selling fuel cell electric passenger vehicle with now 45,000 units sold, most of them running in Korea, unfortunately, only 1,500 here in California. But again, quite successful. On the heavy-duty side, some people are arguing we should have started with heavy-duty because heavy-duty really brings scale. It really, for comparison's sake, a passenger car tank is about 6 kilos of hydrogen, 6 to 7. A commercial vehicle, a truck, is maybe 70. The train is 200. So I would say, if America would use trains more, I said, please bring them everywhere, right? So that would be really awesome. But what I really want to say is we are here. The technology is there, the trucks are there, the cars are there, the trains are here. In case of mileage, we have accumulated more than 12 million miles in Europe alone. So with excellent performance and resiliency, we had no breakdowns whatsoever on the fuel cell side, and that's really, I mean, it's a truck and a car, so you have a flat tire, you have mechanical problems, of course. But from a fuel cell perspective, this is very well developed right now. Also from safety, we get this question quite often, and I really like that you emphasize safety so much. We had a couple of drivers that were saying, oh, I'm not standing next to the truck when it fuels, which is really sad to hear, and I think we have a lot of educational work to do still. Workforce training, yes, educational work, and we have to remove the stigma that hydrogen is still carrying. It is, from our perspective, a fuel like any other fuel. It's a little bit more difficult to handle because of the volumetric, low volumetric energy density. As everybody knows, you have to compress it to very, very high pressure or liquefy it or whatever you want to do. But again, this is all manageable from a technology perspective in 2025. We are there, so please use hydrogen more and adopt as good as you can, I think.
Thanks. Brianne, what do you think the best approach to regulatory and code compliance for these emerging technologies, given that regulatory agencies and codes struggle to keep pace with technological advancement?
Yeah, so I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit. For us, it was really about going back to kind of first engineering principles on a lot of our infrastructure programs for ZE. Because, yeah, if you take a look at a lot of the codes or local codes, they're really not going to address a lot of the hazards. And I think SBCTA was a great example where when we started thinking about the facility and the fueling infrastructure, we took a look at what the codes would have us do to the facility retrofit. And we really, honestly, we didn't feel like it addressed the hazards appropriately. There really weren't written around having that volume of fuel in the space. And so we sort of looked at that as a first step, and then we kind of took a step back and said, okay, well, let's take a hazard-based approach to design. We're going to look at what the introduction of this vehicle does, right? Both hydrogen storage and the batteries, right? And that specific battery chemistry that's being introduced. And then, look at that holistically, and we actually did CFD modeling, we ran a high-room model, and it was great working with SBCTA because we had sort of the room to do that. And then we had the safety panel on board to bounce ideas off of, and really we were kind of creating the standard. And so, I'll give a specific example, but I think fire suppression was a really interesting one,
Right.
where if you just sort of blindly follow the code, you're just increasing your sprinkler system and blasting the facility with water if there's a hydrogen release and fire.
Yeah.
And so you sort of stop and think, okay, well, that's not really good.
Yep.
That's not really going to help. So, I think it was about sort of saying, okay, what is the intent of this? What are we trying to achieve? What is the hazard we're trying to mitigate? And so we really were able to develop some some great designs, and we deviated from the codes. And then we worked very closely with the authorities early to sort of say, here's what we're seeing, here's what we're doing, here's what the code says, but here's why we think what we are doing is safer. And the permitting was actually quite quick in the end. And so I think that's sort of the recommendation for me is you can't rely on folks just sort of blindly looking at the codes right now. You need to work with a team that's going to kind of look at that holistically, use engineering best practice, look at the hazards and design around that for your specific system, and the hazards that are being introduced, and also your level and your level of exposure and risk that agency is wanting to have, right? And I think as we see things advance, we'll see more standardized approaches to these facilities. But I don't see that coming for a while. And I think if you tour a lot of the facilities that are coming online, there's a lot of differences in how they've approached their maintenance and things like that. So yeah, that's my recommendation.
Appreciate that. Similar headaches at the port. I've got the fire department that's operating off of the 2022 version of NFPA2, which doesn't really help in 2025 a ton. There's a lot of limitations in the older stuff, but turns out it takes a while for that stuff to get pushed through the various organizations and that sort of stuff. And pack your patience, right?
Well, and what was interesting too is you'd think that on the battery electric side things are further along, but the advancement of battery chemistry, right? Like there's new battery chemistries coming out every week.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was interesting to sort of ask ourselves, well, what are the safety requirements, and does it off gas, or does it go into thermal runaway, or how do we store this thing? So again, just you actually have to go back and look at the manufacturer and understand that.
Yeah, the safety piece you brought up earlier was kind of resonated with me. We brought the first hydrogen fuel cell powered top handler to the port environment, and in the early days, I would interview every operator after they drove it. And one of the themes that started to emerge that I hadn't necessarily accounted for was the operators were saying that they were less fatigued at the end of the shift. And that is a recurring theme through all the zero emissions equipment we've tested on the terminal, whether it be a yard tractor or a top handler. And I have a hypothesis, so when this equipment proliferates to a level where I can get a good data sample, my hypothesis is we'll see a major reduction in fatigue-related mishaps on the job because of this equipment. And I think it's largely in part because they're not sitting 3 feet away from a 13-liter diesel engine that's vibrating and noisy and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of helpful stuff coming with that.
Matt, I have a very nice story to tell about that, if I may.
Please.
So,
Please.
to lighten the mood here a little bit, and this is a true story, even though it sounds quite made up, but it actually happened. So in Switzerland, again, 50 trucks, and we had 2 accounts from truck drivers that were actually changing their employer to drive in the fuel cell truck. So because they heard it so great, and one of those gentlemen actually told me, Ben, thank you. And I said, why? You saved my marriage. I'm less stressed. I'm not an ass to my wife anymore. And she actually started hugging me again because I'm not smelling of diesel when I come back from the shift. I was like, well, if that's really, there's a human component to it.
Sure.
It's very important.
Yeah.
And it's not just clean and green and whatnot, it also helps the people who are operating the equipment. It should be brought up more.
Yeah, it was really profound to hear that feedback, and a great other data point there. I just recall one individual said, I used to have to take a nap when I got home, in order to give my best to my family. And he said, since I've been driving this machine, I'm good. I can just, it's all good. So, yeah, there's a lot of upside to that sort of stuff, and I hope it accelerates. So we have 14 minutes left,
And this is the part where we open it up to questions from the audience, if there is any. And if there isn't, well, I'll just make up some. Go ahead.
Microphone or no? I can speak up.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
So next year, by this time, we're going to have a new governor in the state of California. And the odds are probably a bunch of other new staff as well. So it's a hypothetical question for all of you. If you were in charge of CalSTA starting November, what would be the first policy you would push to help proliferate hydrogen infrastructure and technology in California?
Oh gosh, you guys go first. Wanna start?
Yeah, I guess I will start. I think we're gonna keep what we have, and the first thing we want to do is we're gonna push zero emissions technologies, but we're not name zero emission technologies. You know, we need innovations. So we really need some breakthrough technology to push out battery electric technology or fuel cell technology. But first thing, we are gonna continue our drive to zero emissions.
I would take, and I gotta be careful here, so I'm not, I'm not speaking on behalf of my board, because we have other ideas for discretionary funding, but if I was CalSTA and queen for a day, say, I would take a good portion of that discretionary funding out of the recent cap and trade deal, and I would push to have private-public partnership for hydrogen fuel production in at least 2 key locations, with a phased plan to get it to zero emission, but not set that as the goal or maybe the obstacle to actually accomplishing it if you set that too early.
Yeah.
Carrie sort of stole what I was going to I agree completely. I think to go even like one level down too, I think there's a real challenge between the molecule production side of things and then the end user and sort of reaching agreement. To be honest, I think we've seen that in a few projects where it's hard to actually just negotiate the terms and conditions of a fuel supply. So I think if there's some way to kind of get involved in, and I know there's initiatives on this happening, but just really push it forward, but just standardizing access to fuel supply, and trying to also kind of get that distributed throughout the state in a kind of a more consistent way. Obviously, the goal being in hydrogen trucks as well. But yeah, I think that's the other piece of the puzzle that's really tough. Is even if we increase supply, then there's this challenge of getting that contract agreed between the end user. So that needs to be addressed as well in some way.
But I did say public-private partnership, so there'd be a public element where we could get those contracts done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I like your answer.
I mean, accessibility of cheap fuel, I think, or let's say affordable fuel, I want to use the term cheap, is I think the most important thing we have to focus on collectively. A fleet operator, for example, the first thing he looks at is total cost of ownership. If the fuel cost is double or triple than what it is right now, he will never adopt because he can't afford to. Again, this is what I said earlier, somebody has to pay, right, ultimately. But what I think is important, and we had this in the other discussion earlier in the passenger car group at 2 p.m., if you look at historically what went into battery electric, if we could shift that a little bit more towards hydrogen, that would already help tremendously. Because just a very small portion of funding went to hydrogen so far in comparison. So, and I think you can always argue, oh, it's subsidized, it's no good. With that argument, we would never have gotten to a renewable or natural gas pipeline network that we have today, which came after the oil crisis, right? We would not have nuclear power because hundreds of billions of dollars went into these technologies initially to get them where they are. Hydrogen was always like a little bit like the unwanted child, right? nobody really cared about it. You can do everything with batteries. Some people claim you can even do deep sea shipping with batteries, which is absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, a little bit more of a fairer look at things and, would help.
Awesome answers, and I agree. Like, yeah, it's an what a time to be alive, right? Who else? You had one, right?
I did a little different though, and it might be more technical. Yeah.
All good.
But I guess I was just curious, kind of looking more towards the future of green hydrogen. I'm just curious if everyone could kind of remark on what their vision for, a green hydrogen infrastructure in California might look like. Whether it's like a desal and a hydrogen hub next to one another, or what looks the most feasible on later time horizons that we're talking about right now.
Good question.
I mean, we have a lot of desert in San Bernardino County, and I'm a fan of the work that's been done at University of California, Irvine Center for Hydrogen Center. And I think they've done a lot of good work looking at the natural resources we have, whether it be sun, wind, hydroelectric, any of those. So I would look at their work and start placing where you need the feedstock production set. But I would love to see it. I would love to see and I don't know the exact location, I'd have to rely on those technical experts, but where is that location where you have wind, you have solar, and you could have a production plant that was close to a transportation network that could disseminate to key population centers.
Anyone else? Want to go?
Yeah, if I may.
Sure.
So I'm a little bit pessimistic in the current environment. While I would love to see more electrolytic hydrogen in the marketplace, I know that there are several hurdles for it. I mean, the cost of the electrolyzers, which is high. Then you need solar or wind, ideally, or else you cannot really claim it's green hydrogen. I'm familiar with a couple of projects that have been proposed under the Arches Hydrogen Hub project, which is unfortunately paused for the time being. And they're telling me, well, a lot of those solar panels come out of China, and they're being tariffed extremely high right now. So this has a huge impact. There is only a certain amount of equipment that you can actually get here in the United States. A lot of stuff is being imported, and that is all being affected by the current policies, so for the better or worse. So, yeah, I mean, there are very promising technologies being developed right now, including electrolyzers that could use maybe even seawater directly without the need of having like clear water that is basically being removed of any inputs there. So, but this is, I don't know when this will actually come. So, sorry for being a little bit negative here right now, but.
Yeah, I kind of look at it in a couple of time horizons. I've got the right here, right now, where, at a container terminal, I see the value in the hydrogen equipment. We tested it, validated it is a solution to the problem. Right now, getting the hydrogen is the big thing we're trying to sort out. And until I can get green or low CI, zero CI hydrogen delivered out of a low pressure pipe on my terminal, I'm considering what it would look like to do on-site production of my own. Because right now I don't need 50 tons a day. I need probably 10 tons a month. And I can produce that on-site for my test case and power the equipment, get the data, and then as the delivery mechanisms mature, because the cost of the molecule at the point of production versus the point of use is always going to be a difficult, until new technology emerges, it's going to be a difficult thing to fix. So that's why we are really looking at the local production until we get these projects going and get green hydrogen or naturally occurring hydrogen. Any other questions? Okay. We're going to wrap with one going around for the panelists. In one sentence, what's your vision for California's zero emissions mobility landscape in 2035?
We still got 10 years, so 10 years a lot of things can happen, and I think that by that time we have a little more zero emission at that time compared to now.
I hope so. That's the plan.
I envision a clean, connected system that really serves people and communities well. You heard some comments about the effects on the operators and how close they are to it, but that effect they're feeling, like we all kind of feel it, like it spreads out and we all feel it. So a clean, connected transportation system that serves the community and improves air quality.
I think for me, it's just about consistent growth and really seeing, every month, every year, like developments in the technologies, improvements. And then the other part of that is really knowledge sharing. I think this needs to be a space where folks are collaborating, sharing what they're doing, so that, again, there's that consistent way forward, instead of having a bunch of agencies sort of trying to do the same thing at once. So yeah, growth and forward pace.
Love it.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we will have a commodity market by that time, right? Hydrogen being used by everyone, available to everyone, and without the need to enter take-or-pay agreements that may bankrupt eventually. So I think that's where we have to all work together on.